Welcome to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, the ultimate resource for business leaders eager to skyrocket company growth. I'm your host, Kerry Curran, and this episode is From DTC to Legacy Brands, Evolving Marketing Playbooks. Today's special guest is Joe Anhult, DTC marketing expert and fractional CMO. In this episode, we delve into the dynamic world of direct-to-consumer or DTC brands. We discuss how omni-channel strategies and the integration of brand and performance marketing can elevate your business. Joe shares expert tips on leveraging organic social media, refining brand positioning, and the importance of creative storytelling. Whether you're a startup or an established brand, this discussion offers valuable insights to enhance your marketing approach and drive growth in today's competitive landscape. Tune in to learn how to build a compelling brand and boost your revenue. And welcome, Joe. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background and experience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kerry, so much for having me. So my entire career, I've been with early stage consumer startups, very traditional D2C. For about 3.5, 4 years, I was with the furniture retailer Interior Define, leading marketing, and then moved over to Koyo, which is a luxury footwear business based in New York, where I was leading marketing, e-commerce, and also helping on the brand and creative side of things as well. So all D2C, e-commerce, consumer brands, that's been the name of the game for me.
Yeah, no, you definitely have impressive experience. So great. So I know you're talking to a lot of brands today and you have across your experience. So what are you hearing in the industry today? How are brands kind of thinking about where marketing and sales are in this environment?
Yeah, so the two big conversations that I've seen happening for months now and continuing to happen today are around omni-channel, right? So how can we diversify away from just a hard direct consumer e-commerce play into retail, into wholesale, into pop-ups, into affiliates, partnerships, you name it. How can we just improve distribution, right? The short of it. And then the second big thing is how can we think about brand and in relation to performance and growth? For so long, a lot of DTC brands have been following this growth and growth hack playbook that's been primarily driven by the efficiency of Facebook and Meta, right? That no longer exists. So we're trying to learn this new playbook, this new recipe that, still has the fundamentals of, early stage D2C, let's just call it 1.0. But this 2.0, what does it look like with brand in partnership with performance? And that's the big challenge that I like to solve with my current clients because it's a hard one to solve for. The growth and performance playbook, in my opinion, is not 100% baked, but I think, 80, 90% of the way there. Whereas the brand, the creative, that's always changing. It's always morphing. It's more of an art than a science versus the other side of the coin. So that's the other big conversation that's happening. And I love being a part of that because, again, I think it's a more creative and challenging problem to solve for these days.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we've seen the pendulum swing a bit where the big kind of legacy brands were, quickly trying to copy the D2C brands or acquiring them instead of trying to compete with them because the D2C brands, to your point, they had the social platforms and they had a much more nimble way of connecting and engaging to their target audience. Now it's more the D2C brands need to take a few tips from the more legacy brand playbooks to get that upper funnel branding. So talk a bit about kind of where you see the traditional growth marketing playbook and kind of where it's going.
Yeah, so I think let's start with kind of like the small upstart D2C brand, right? Who maybe they don't have deep pockets to do big out-of-home campaigns or streaming TV or linear TV for that matter, right? And what I like to coach my clients on is start with your own channels, right? So your website, your social media following,
Mm-hmm.
and work those muscles of clearly defining your creative positioning and your brand positioning through those
Mm-hmm.
channels, leading
Mm-hmm.
with social media, because it's just such a fun platform to tell your story. It's led by creators and creative,
Yeah.
and it's very forgiving, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
mess up, consumers and people who are digesting this content have a very short memory, so you live to see another day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the flip side of that, the deeper the pockets, usually the larger the production, more is at stake. And it's just more challenging to execute in a short manner. So it really is back to kind of the fundamentals of organic social, of refining your story, refining your pitch, understanding what people are responding to, and double
Mm-hmm.
down on that and
Mm-hmm.
iterate on that. Similar to the way a lot of people are approaching the meta channel right now, it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
creative testing, right? So it's a lot of creative testing again on the organic side as well. To again, I like to call it like dialing in. If you're a coffee fan or coffee fans listening, they know like dialing in the espresso is a delicate kind of art form, right? And so dialing in your brand, dialing in your story is delicate and it takes time. But the best practice for this is through organic social. So that's where I tell people to start. If you do have deeper pockets, then you can get a bit more creative with
Mm-hmm.
going after TV, going after streaming. YouTube is a great place to kind of start a little bit smaller bets, right, are needed to be taken there. But it's all visual mediums. It's all video mediums as well. TikTok has been a dominant player in this space because of that, because they've been video first. And I think we're all just following that lead across whatever platform is available.
Mm-hmm. And how are you seeing brands kind of respond to the increased competition or the more fickle consumer behavior in engaging with these platforms?
So I think there's a higher stakes to be more creative and stick
Mm-hmm.
out. And I think the brands that go after the shock and awe are winning in the short term, but I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that's a winning long term play.
Yeah.
So I think the brands that are just much more creative in the short term will be a long term win as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm trying to think of the big ones off the top of my head. I mean, obviously the one that a lot of people are continuing to talk about are like the liquid deaths of the world, right? So
Yeah.
that like shock and awe, I think, uh, to go back on what I just said, is still winning in the short term. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
to be determined if it wins in the long term.
Yeah.
But we will wait and see. But obviously, they made a conscious choice to lead with brand, to lead with more traditional marketing. Traditional marketing to me is kind of the four P's of marketing, and kind of almost like the Madison Avenue Don Draper esque. And it's working for them. And I see a lot of other people trying to play with this shock and awe. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
again, we'll see if it has a long shelf life.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point about liquid death because it's definitely the disruptor in the category and a great marketing case study where it's really brand. The product's not that different from
Water,
your
right?
bottled
Yeah.
water, right? But
The can too.
yeah,
The I guess like the vessel. It looks
yeah,
like a tall boy beer can. So
right.
it's twofold. It's
You
not
can
just
look
the name, but it's also
cool,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally.
But to your point, like, is that going to be a long term strategy? Like, maybe consumers are going to be like, okay, this was fun, but I don't want to pay that extra $2 for my water, or you know what, I actually don't like the taste of water out of a can. I don't know, but I'm saying like
Right.
it's interesting. It's a good interesting call out that this isn't, this is still new and disruptive. What happens when it's no longer new and disruptive? Are there other examples of brands you've been seeing? Have you seen do it well?
On the branding and kind of traditional marketing side of things.
Yeah, or just engaging through the social platforms.
Totally. So the first one that came to mind was a really big brand in the luxury space. Jacques Mousse is making waves to compete against the Louis Vuitton and the Gucci's of the
Mm-hmm.
world. And what I love about him is he's really done a few things well. Well, first and foremost, his product is fantastic, but he's really carved out a niche within the marketing world, I would say, of experiential marketing. And with his fashion shows, the locations he's chosen are
Mm-hmm.
just immaculate, and they speak to the perceived value of the brand, right? And they're beautiful, right? So um, I like, everyone knows within real estate, like location is the number 1 through 10 in terms of priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And with his on location shoots and experiences, it's the same, right? So location. Also, when you're picking like retail locations, that's key as well. So I love what he's done. You can almost think about it as like practical effects, right? He's not
Mm-hmm.
using um, AI to intense degree, although he is starting to pick up the augmented reality
Mm-hmm.
experiences, which I think is really interesting. But again, just the practical effects of finding a really beautiful, distinct location and using that as your backdrop for your creative that you can capture on set, but then also push that out to social media, on your website, for PR and press and things like that. I think that's really, really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on more of the upstart play, I mean, Liquid Death again, I think is important to think about. There's a few seltzer drinks that are doing well. In the apparel space, I think Viore again, not again,
Mm-hmm.
but needs to be mentioned because they're just having a really big moment right now, kind of
Yep.
off of the tailwinds of Lululemon and just offering another
Mm-hmm.
price point and another kind of positioning for Lululemon, who has fallen off a bit. Um, and then even, I guess, like early days, there's this really cool brand out of Scandinavia called Tekla that I think is doing really well. And again, they're just very visually led, more so with still images. And again, similar to Jacquemus, it's the locations they choose, the models they choose, the scenery, the use of practical effects. I think they do really well. And they're a brand that I've been following for some months now that I think will become a household name in the textile vertical, bedding, sheets, nightwear, bathwear, things like that. That's another cool brand that I've had on my radar for some time now.
That's no, those are great examples. And it sounds like it's, the brands that are standing out and kind of breaking through the clutter are the ones that are leaning more into branding and storytelling and get that more like customer engagement from that perspective.
Yeah, I think so. I'm biased because I've been a marketer my entire career, and
Hmm.
I love the old school advertising agencies that used to be so popular, and I think we're seeing a resurgence from that. And I think the consumer wants a story. They want to be a part of a world that they
Hmm.
can identify with, and I think consumers have always wanted that. And
Hmm.
there are clear winners and losers who can communicate the world that they're wanting to build. Um, and it's not as much growth hacking anymore as it is community hacking.
Yeah.
And at least in New York City, there's been a huge rise of social member networks and run clubs, even, right? And I think
Hmm.
they're all taking a page out of what Outdoor Voices did so well in the early days of their brand. They were masters of building community and finding like-minded people who wanted to come together in person
Hmm.
and galvanize and be early adapters to this brand, and really literally wear it on their chest and rep it. And the brands that are doing that well, I think, are winning. But it's not easy. Again, it's more of
Right.
a art than science. But I tell all my
Hmm.
clients, if you're a consumer brand in a highly competitive market, this, I believe, is part of the new playbook. It's how can you galvanize a community? How can you tell a story that people want to buy into? And that's really hard to do. And it takes a lot of reps and it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. But if you do believe in that, then you need to start sooner rather than later and start small. Again, back to my social media example.
Hmm.
Even before that, fine tune your elevator pitch. Make sure you have a clear differentiator. Make sure you understand who is that core customer and how can you continuously provide for them. How can you continuously provide that brand promise for them? And really every day coming in with that approach and just getting a little bit better each and every day is what I tell my clients.
Yeah, no, and that's it sounds like really good advice for them to benefit from. This episode of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, is brought to you by RBMA, Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors. Want to elevate your business and boost revenue? RBMA is here to help. Our expertise in business development and sales, combined with full funnel marketing, propels your growth. We offer fractional CMO, CRO, and CGO services, plus project-based initiatives, ensuring success at every stage. Our unique approach integrates marketing and sales, transforming them into a powerful growth engine. We specialize in B2B agencies, service providers, SaaS companies, and product firms to drive exceptional results. Visit our website to learn more and start your journey to unparalleled success. And now back to our program. Are there other kind of recommendations or kind of examples for those brands that are still kind of starting up and don't have the big budgets, other examples of what they should be looking at?
Yeah. So let me just talk a little bit more. One of the things that I just spoke to was the elevator pitch. And so I do think it's important to have a more fully fleshed brand book, more so for your internal team. So you understand what the priorities are and what not to do, right? So if you have an elevator pitch that's internal facing, that clearly defines who you are, that also is clearly defining who you are not, right? So a good example in terms of utilizing this would be if you want to partner with a certain creator or influencer, do they align with that internal elevator pitch? Right. And you should know right away, like, oh, this is going to work or this is not going to work. The problem, if you don't have that clearly defined, if you don't have the sandbox, if you don't have these rules, then you just open yourself up to everything. And it's really hard to be everything to everybody, right? Because then you really have no differentiation. You don't have a moat around your business. And with little to no resources, it's really hard to be everything to everybody, right? So it really comes down to like picking a lane and sticking with it from day one, right? And okay, if it doesn't work, okay, then pivot and change a little bit, right? But trying to be everything to everybody from day one is, in my experience, really challenging to do, right? And so I, coach my clients, teach my clients, recommend to my clients with that elevator pitch at the very least, define what your product is, how it's different from the competitors in the market, and who your core customer is, right? So those three things right there clear up a lot of what not to do, whether it's a marketing initiative or your product team or your operations team, your customer service team. That tells you a lot of who you are, but more importantly, who you're not. So starting with the elevator pitch, that morphs into what's our mission, what's our values, what's our core product offering, where do we fit in the white space of the market, right? Make that matrix and show your team internally, this is where we fit, right? And that will bleed into anything and everything you do. What's the voice and tone we use in our copy? What's the voice and tone we use with our customer service? What are the visuals? What's the world that we're building? A really fun exercise that I like to lead with my clients with, again, dialing in what's your brand and story and your positioning is, if you were to have a retail store, what would that look and feel like? Because the best way, in my opinion, to build a brand is to invite them into your 3D world, which is often a retail store. So, okay, you're bootstrapping your business. You're not going to have a retail store for a long time, but it's almost like a dream board. What does that look and feel like? So it's easier for your team internally to visualize what it is you're selling, right? What is this brand promise you're promising to your consumers? And having those visuals, having that vision board, right? As cheesy as it sounds, I think does help fine tune, again, your brand, your positioning, and put you on a path that everyone can be walking at the same time. Again, as opposed to if you don't know what path you're walking on, then you're just kind of scatterbrained and you can't focus. And that's where a lot of brands suffer from a lack of focus. So it really is focusing your team, focusing your efforts, adding some visuals to that, building this world internally so everyone understands what you're doing and what that promise is to your customers.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, I know you were saying before as well, to once you have that elevator pitch, that value prop, to shout it over and over and over
Exactly.
again.
Yes. Thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
people underestimate how, your frequency levels in
Hmm.
terms of how many times you can communicate this elevator pitch.
Yeah.
And, you're so tunnel visioned internally. You think, oh, this is getting tired. This is getting overused, but your customers are maybe listening half of the time.
Hmm.
And I mean, Apple's been selling the same phone for what, like 15 years,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
obviously, that's I would say an outlier, but also Nike's been selling us the same thing for 50 years. Just do it, right?
Yep.
And so the runway for communicating this core value prop is a lot longer than I think people understand. And you want to be memorable as a brand. And one thing that we all know from our flashcard days of learning
Hmm.
fractions and long division is repetition, right?
Yep.
So another analogy is, what are your flashcards that you want your customers to see over and over and over again? And you can have some slight variance there.
Hmm.
Nike doesn't just say just do it over and over again. They partner with athletes and entrepreneurs and politicians to tell this story, but it's all the same story, just in a different um, kind of with a slightly different tilt to it. So what is that for you? And don't shy away from having a higher frequency than you think.
Right.
Customers are inundated with these messages. So
Hmm.
um, another thing I like to say is, don't get cute too soon. Keep it plain and simple so people understand what you're doing. Try to have another analogy I use is, what is your in and out model? In and out burgers have like a very simple menu.
Yeah.
Every restaurant looks and feels the same. What is that for you? Early stage companies and entrepreneurs get very excited about the shiny, bright new thing, but there's so much more you can do with just your core offering and refining that. And again, I think there's a longer runway for that initial in and out model than a lot of people think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one other thing you were pointing out is that your customers are only listening 1/10 of the time, or they say we have that everyone has a shorter attention span than a goldfish. So it's
Yeah,
just reiterating that consistent message, but hitting them over the head over and over. And I love the flashcard analogy. I think that's a really strong one, and
yeah,
it makes me think about other marketing examples. My own marketing is just keeping it simple and repeating it.
exactly. It's
Yeah,
all the old tropes that
yeah,
Ogilvy, the famous advertising head, would always preach about,
yeah,
and that's why jingles were such a thing when radio was big, right? Because
yep,
people could recall, people could remember
yes,
why logos are important, why taglines, again,
yep.
just do it or have it your way or I'm
Hmm.
loving it.
Hmm.
These things are just on repeat, so customers can recall them whenever they're in market for whatever product you're selling.
Yeah, for
It makes
sure.
sense.
Hmm. Joe, one other question I wanted you to speak to is that a lot of the branding upper funnel initiatives aren't as clearly measurable as some of
Yeah.
the more performance based. So, talk about how do you help your clients measure the initiatives that can't as directly be as directly measured
Yeah.
as some of the others.
Yeah. Not as easy as like, what's our Facebook ROAS from last
Right, right,
week?
right.
Yeah. So I always start with, this is going to be hard to do, right?
Hmm.
It's not going to be as black and white as, again, like a Facebook ROAS, which honestly, these days, it's really not black and white at all anyway. So it's becoming more and more gray. So
Hmm.
I try to lengthen the time horizon, right? This isn't going to be overnight, next week, next month. It's going to be at least 3 to 6 months, right? So
Hmm.
extending that time horizon. And then also the more tangible KPIs that I like to point to are, what's our organic traffic look like from day one to day 180 or day one to 6 months? What do our brand search terms look like? Has our branded keyword search gone up? Our PR hits, our number of followers on social media, our number
Hmm.
of email signups, again, from that organic channel. What do our general business KPIs look like? As a leader, as a founder, I assume that you have the best pulse on your business from anyone else in the company. So the inputs, and you're also looking at the outputs. The outputs being your business KPI. So if you know your inputs on, let's say, January of 2024 were X, Y, and Z versus January of 2023 were ABC, and then the 6 months prior, you can have an understanding, again, just by having a pulse on the business. Did those inputs have an effect, right? Did your sales go up? Did your retention go up? Was your AOV higher? Was your UPT higher? And you have to have some sort of intuition as a business leader and point to, okay, we actually ran these brand initiatives. I feel a certain level of confidence. It's never going to be 100% that these efforts, these inputs had an effect on the output. So it's not a perfect science. There's more art to this than there is with the growth. But those are just a few ways that I like, those are just a few KPIs that I like to point to for measuring the impact of your brand. And I don't think Liquid Death knew what the impact was going to be from naming and the vessel they chose and the packaging. But you have to assume that had a large piece of the end result, right? Or when Nike partnered with Michael Jordan, right? Or when Apple ran those TV spots of like 1984, those were all educated bets, right? And you're always just trying to obviously minimize the risk. How can you underwrite that brand moment? And at some point, as an entrepreneur, you have to be an entrepreneur and you have to make that bet. And it should always, back to my elevator pitch story and the brand book pitch story, it needs to align with that tagline, with that North Star, with the world that you're building. It becomes really challenging if you execute a brand moment that doesn't align with this world you're building, because the consumer is going to get confused, and it's going to be even more challenging to measure the impact because it probably won't be as impactful.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Joe. Any other, this has been extremely valuable and educational. I've taken notes myself, but any other like last minute, or I shouldn't say last minute, any other additional recommendations for brands that are getting started or, want to essentially drive greater growth?
I don't think anything out of the ordinary. I think just start somewhere. Don't have a decision paralysis where you don't know where to go, and just start and be forgiving to yourself. It's not going to be home runs every time, and understand that it's going to take, just extend your time horizon. It's not going to be next week, next month. Give yourself more grace for a longer period of time. And as you continue to refine, to learn, to educate yourself, you will get better and the results will come. But in the early days, I would focus more so on the input and getting better each and every day, as opposed to, we don't have enough followers, we don't have enough email subscribers, we don't have enough sales. Try to focus much more on the input in the early days, and just getting better than the previous day, getting better than the previous week, and improving on those inputs as opposed to those outputs. That would be my advice to those early stage companies.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate you joining us, and we hope we can have you on again sometime soon.
Would love that. Thank you again, Kerry.
Yep. Thank you. I'm Kerry Curran, and this is Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, brought to you by RBMA, Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors. Stay tuned for our next episode, Leveraging Technology for Modern Marketing, AI, Analytics, and the Ecoverse. And be sure to subscribe to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, for more ways to skyrocket your company growth.